This year I'm highlighting a different one of my books each month, and this month is June 2024, so we know in the future, and I'm highlighting the book The Eye of the Beholder and Other Tales. Eye of the Beholder is the second book in the Adventures of Viola Stewart series, which is a Victorian mystery series with a touch of steampunk. The book itself has 3 short stories and the longer novella, which is Eye of the Beholder. The first short story is a look at the relationship between Viola and her friend Dr. Henry Collins, who is the local police surgeon and helps her in her investigations. The second short story is Point of View, which is a sort of peek at the behind the scenes downstairs from Polly the maid's point of view while the others are out doing their investigating. Mars Ascending gives us a hint into Viola's enthusiasm for science and all things astronomical, and a bit more on the relationship between her and Henry. And Eye of the Beholder is the main murder mystery, and it has mummies, curses and madness. Will Viola end up going into the asylum, or is it a mummy's curse, or is it something else? I've spoken before about where ideas for my stories come from. This time it's Eye of the Beholder and Other Tales. In the book there's 3 short stories and a main novella. A Point of View, which is one of the short stories, was inspired by TV episodes focusing on behind the scenes from secondary characters' point of view, like Doctor Who's Blink and Star Trek's Below Decks. In the story, we get to see what Molly, that's Viola's housekeeper, has to deal with while Viola is off detectiving and having fun. Eye of the Beholder, which is the main novella in the book, emerged from a binge session of watching ancient Egypt documentaries over about a week or 2 or 3, and then a rewatch of the movie Young Sherlock. So really, ideas can come from almost anywhere.
Welcome to Delusional Author Talk, where every time I post my book, I think it's going to pop off.
At the beginning of the month, I did an introduction to this month's highlighted book, Eye of the Beholder and Other Tales. The book has 3 short stories and novella, and I thought I'd go through the 3 short stories in a bit more detail today. The first story is a present for Viola, and it is the April 23rd, which is Viola Stewart's birthday, and it's not really a mystery story as such. It centres more around the relationship between Viola and her friend Dr. Henry Collins. Viola thinks that he's forgotten her birthday, but her friend Sir Archibald Huntington Smythe arrives and breaks the news that Henry's been called out on an emergency. Now, Sir Archibald is one of her crime-solving cohorts that you meet throughout the stories, and he gives her this large silver locket with amethysts attached to it, which actually conceal a set of lockpicks, and she really loves that present. Henry also has a surprise for her. Well, actually he has 2 surprises for her. One is a steam-driven plectocycle. Now, plectocycle is like a tricycle with the really big wheels at the back and the small one at the front, and it's got a little handle to steer it, and the seat sort of sits in between the 2 big wheels at the back. He's obviously got connections to get her this plectocycle, and getting a special, obtaining a special license under the Queen Victoria's Mechanicals Act, which is in my steampunk world, so Viola can actually own it. Unfortunately, Henry never actually gets the chance to give her the second present, or not yet, as she's off to enjoy her new found freedom and independence on this plectocycle, and she's just going around. The second story is a point of view, and it's a peek at the downstairs characters, and it's from Polly, the housemaid's point of view. And it begins with Polly and her beau Constable Cooper. Yes, that's right. And then her frustration as she observes the awkward courtship between Viola and Dr. Collins. And when Viola is drawn away into another mystery, this time to save the name of their friend Conan Doyle, Polly has to look after Viola and run the household and handle an intruder, a man in grey, shh, spoilers, by herself, while Viola and Henry and Sir Archibald are away off on an adventure. And we also see Viola doing painting. That's just one of her hobbies that she does. And Lady Calthorpe, who's a recurring secondary character, inserts herself into the investigation there as well. And the third short story is Mars Ascending. Sir Archibald is hosting a dinner with Viola, Henry, Lord and Lady Calthorpe. That's all of them, to unveil his new tracking telescope, which is a really big thing. And Viola, again, is distracted by gadgets and science, and Lady Calthorpe and Sir Archibald are matchmaking during the day. And this all leads us up to the main novella in the book, which is I the Beholder, and I will go through that in another post. This is the second post talking more about the actual stories in Eye of the Beholder and Other Tales. Eye of the Beholder begins with the mysterious Professor Foss visiting his ex-mentor in Bedlam, which is a 19th century asylum in London. And he's eager to find answers, but he can only hear just his mentor's just doing ramblings of curses and beware the eye and all these mysterious things. It's terribly mysterious. Next we go to a mummy unwrapping, which I do not condone, by the way, but it was done in the 19th century and it was a big thing. And this is done as a big event, and Viola and Henry and their friends are there. And while they're there, there's a dead body that turns up. When Henry, who's the police surgeon for the local police, examines the body, he finds something very strange. He finds an Egyptian amulet of an eye. So Viola, Henry and Sir Archibald are on the case again. They visit the British Museum for information about the amulet and meet the Egyptologist, who is Professor Foss. And they also recognise the assistant from the mummy unwrapping, whose name was Mr. Turner, I think. Yes, it was. And Professor Foss is a bit sort of offhanded and doesn't really want to talk to them much. The next day, Professor Foss's extrovert wife visits Viola to apologise for her husband's rude behaviour the day before. And she mentions a mummy's curse and hints at her husband's anger towards her and the way he acts, and begs her not to mention it, that she's visited Viola, and fears that her husband will send her away to Bedlam. Then, not very much longer, Mrs. Foss discovers that her husband is burying something in the local park, and the professor claims that he's having blackouts and he doesn't remember doing this, and so she agrees to keep that a secret. Another body arrives at the morgue, and Viola assists with this examination, which she does often do, and they find the same sort of amulet there again. So they re-examine the sarcophagus from the mummy unwrapping, and they discover it's got a curse, and confirming Professor Foss's information. And Viola tells Henry about her conversation with Mrs. Foss and Professor Foss, her husband's fixation on this amulet. Later, Viola falls ill and starts raving, and Henry and Polly have to look after her. And Henry is really quite worried as she appears that she's going mad, and he vows to do anything and everything he can to stop her having to go and be put into Bedlam, because he knows that the worst thing for her would be losing her independence. So he abandons the investigation and goes to find a cure for Viola so she won't be forced into the asylum. But while he's asleep, because he's exhausted, Viola escapes and on her plectocycle in the middle of all this sort of hallucinations and raving and stuff, and she's navigating the hellscape she's trapped into, and she's trying to warn Foss. I can't tell you about what, that's a spoiler. Unfortunately, she's too late, and there's a showdown in the middle of the night in the British Museum while Viola fights off not only her demons but the murderer as well.